Martin Penderwick is such like a exhausted, like, I'm just on vacation with my kids. I'm going to sit in my room and read about my plants, and I hope they don't die. Hello! Welcome back to Nostalgia Club. We are three sound designers here to talk about media like books and movies that make us nostalgic and our perspectives of said media now that we are adults. My name is Jino, and I'm here with my two co-hosts,
Victoria
and Michael.
And today we are talking about the Penderwicks series, specifically the first Penderwicks book, which has a long subtitle that I know
by heart. No delay needed in uttering said subtitle.
The Penderwicks, A Summer Tale of Four Sisters, Two Rabbits, and a Very Interesting Boy by Jeanne Birdsall. This is a book series that you two have not read. You have no experience with until now.
Nope.
No.
But it is very near and dear to my heart, and I'm very, very excited. If you have not listened to our Little Women episode, I anticipate we're going to be talking about Little Women a lot because the Penderwicks is heavily, heavily inspired by Little Women and pays tribute to that book series frequently.
Yeah.
So there's going to be some crossover.
I brought up that I wanted us to cover Little Women, and Jino was like, oh, that's perfect because I really want to cover the Penderwicks. And we're like, let's read them at the same time. One is very influenced by the other. There are a lot of parallels. So I'm really excited because if you listen to last week's episode, I love Little Women. And so I really enjoyed reading the Penderwicks.
Yes. And reading Little Women broadened my mind about just how much the Penderwicks takes inspiration from Louisa May Alcott. And I was also surprised to remember that the Penderwicks directly references Little Women and Louisa May Alcott semi-frequently throughout the 5-book series. We're only going to be talking about the first book, but I'll probably inevitably spoil parts of the other 4 books, so listener be warned.
I'm excited for that.
The first Penderwicks book came out in 2005. The most recent one came out in 2019.
Wow.
And for context of like time frame within the world, Batty is, I think...
Batty's the youngest Penderwick at the beginning of the series.
She's 4 or 5 in the first book, I think.
Yeah, she's very young.
And she's 19 in the last book.
Wow.
So that's the time frame we're going over in these 5 books.
So you really grow up with these Penderwicks.
Yes. When I was in like middle school, high school age, my mom, I think, had bought the Penderwicks book, maybe from like a Scholastic book fair or something. And it just sort of sat on a shelf in my home for a long, long time before I picked it up, maybe out of boredom. And I really, really like this book. It is so cozy and it's so nostalgic and it feels so timeless. Not in a way where it feels old, but where it feels like it could have existed anywhere. It's unspecific in its references, but it's specific in like the feeling of childhood nostalgia. And so this is like the perfect book for a nostalgia club for me because like I'm nostalgic for it, but also the book like evokes nostalgia.
Yeah.
I only learned that the other 4 books existed post-college.
Oh,
really?
Wow.
And I read them all in rapid succession. And it was a very strange experience for me because as these books progress, the timelessness of the series goes away. So the first book is very timeless. And by the 5th book, we're getting very specific references to Hamilton.
Wow.
And stuff like that. And so it really, reading the books, especially in like rapid succession, feels like growing up. Because you're watching this sort of like rosy childhood nostalgia like fade away as our characters grow up and they start to have real world problems. But our perspective characters are always young kids. They always find a new like kid to be the main perspective.
Interesting.
And so it's always from like a child's perspective, but you're watching these characters grow up and get jobs and deal with being, you know, lower middle class, much like Little Women, and, you know, getting married and family stuff. It's no other book series to me encapsulates the feeling of nostalgia so well as the Penderwicks.
Ooh.
That's fascinating that you know what? That almost makes me think of Narnia a little bit. Because as the Narnia books progress, they'll be like, children, you're aging out of Narnia.
Yeah.
We need new children to be point of view characters in Narnia.
Yeah, it's sort of like that, yeah.
That's fascinating. Except it feels and this is obvious, but that feels more real than point of view kids in Narnia.
Yeah.
It feels more, I don't know, just like
I mean, the
emotionally
difference is
resonant.
in Narnia, like when the main Pevensey kids age out, then you suddenly get new characters, but then like the old characters aren't as present anymore.
Yeah.
And then that's where a lot of people fall off of Narnia because they're like, I really liked those characters and they're not here anymore. Whereas in the Penderwicks, even though it seems like you get different, like younger Penderwicks as point of view characters, you still get to learn what happens to the core group of Penderwicks that you meet in the first book.
Yes. I would love to know your guys' thoughts and vibes on this. Who wants to go first?
Good.
Good.
You won't know. No, I'm kidding.
No, it's fantastic.
Yeah.
When I think of Narnia, I don't often think of like extremely well-rendered children characters. I mean, they're well-rendered, but like, oh, they got nothing on the specificity and like uniqueness and likability of the Penderwicks, rendered in, granted, very romantic, like a very romantic setting, partly romantic due to the fact that it is like through the lens of an author's voice talking about when the girls look back and remember this summer, here are the things that they recall.
Mm-hmm.
But it's each of the Penderwick sisters is so like clarion in their personalities, in what they like out of a bedroom, in how they behave, the word choices that they use. And every new chapter brings you an extra little layer to each of them that like further complicates them in different ways. I can't even begin to like get into the specificity of it, but it's like you'll get Rosalind, who's like the eldest Penderwick sister, who's very much like in that mode of I gotta take care of my sisters and my family, who when taken with a certain flight of fancy and like walking out at midnight on her own, the language of the prose sort of rendered through her experience becomes extremely fantastic, fairy tale like, romantic, and you get to see this character who's been the most responsible one let loose on like a mental emotional level for the first time. Jane, or I'll go with Skye next, who's the second oldest. She's probably the most consistent, but one of the interesting things you get early on is that even though she's like the most mud child of the children, she needs like a clean room. She needs like a spotless white room, and it's got to be orderly.
Yeah.
And when she gets 2 beds in that room, she's like, this is the Monday, Wednesday, Friday bed, and this is the Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday bed, and Sunday I will split the both of them. So she's got like this dichotomy. Jane is total flights of fancy all the time. She's writing a book about like a character she's created called Sabrina Starr. And yet, despite this like very romanticized view of the world and a penchant for like creating larger than life stories just because of the bounds of her own imagination, she has another character that doesn't seem to have a book of his own, but when she's like playing soccer is just like a character that she invokes for herself.
Yeah, she becomes Mick Hart and she's out to destroy shins.
Which is just another detail about her. And then Baddie's the youngest, and she's great and often in peril.
I'm so worried about this kid.
If anything, the character who seemed the least distinct was Jeffrey.
Boy!
The quote-unquote very interesting boy. I suppose he is interesting.
Yeah.
Largely because of the details surrounding him. Though it was funny, pretty much most of his chapters, when something happens that he likes, it'll be like, Jeffrey smiled. And then it's like, when he's reminded of the fact that his mother is cruel, it's like, Jeffrey frowned again. And I'm like, this is the boyest boy to ever
Poor
boy.
kid.
He's just taking it all in stride.
He's in this first book, Jeffrey is very much like he's there and that's all you need from him.
Yeah.
He is, like you said, the platonic ideal of like nice boy.
Yeah.
Like doing his best. He gets more character development and he gets more like drama in later entries into the not a trilogy, there's 5 of them. What's that called?
Sequence.
Sequence. Later entries in the sequence. In fact,
Series, I guess.
yeah. In fact, all of these sisters get more complicated as the books go on. I mean, inevitably,
As
you
you
get more
do
time.
when you grow up.
Yeah. But at least for me personally, like, I'm like a cis guy. There should be, I mean, I'm not saying there should be, but like, you wouldn't expect me to have like any sort of deep connection with a book about 4 young girls, especially reading it in like middle school, high school, when I'm like my edgiest or whatever. But I think Jeanne Birdsall does such an excellent job of taking like the essence of childhood, what basically any child who had like a decent, healthy upbringing, and just like dials that down into like 4 characters, and you can easily see yourself, or at least myself, like I like to write as I saw myself as a very creative person, but also like I like to be clean, but also I like playing soccer, but also I felt very responsible for my younger brother. And also I liked, sometimes I just wanted to like pet an animal. I don't know, like they're very distinct, but also like as a whole, you're like, yeah, that's childhood to me.
Hmm.
I'm speaking like this is a universal experience, but like it does feel very personal to me. Like this is what, if I was split into 4 children, four girls, this is what I would want my childhood experience to be.
As you said that, I was like, yeah, I do see Jino in a lot of these characters.
Well, it tracks.
Yeah.
And it feels, I mean, hey, you love Gravity Falls. And this feels like it's got a kindred sort of narrative soul.
Gravity Falls, but there's no demons.
No demon. It's much more comfy.
Didn't we say with Gravity Falls, like when Michael and I watched Gravity Falls, we were like, oh, we understand Jino better after watching this series. I think the Penderwicks is going to be a similar book series where we're like, yes, this is why Jino is the way he is. And that's great.
There are just like...
Not this is the only... I'm not... yeah, okay.
My personality
You know what
can
I
be
mean.
distilled down into 2 pieces of fictional media. No,
I'm not
but there
trying
are
to
a lot
limit
of
you
like...
to your experiences.
There are a lot of like, just like happenstantial... So the Penderwicks is set in like Upper East Coast, like Boston, Massachusetts area. Like that's where most of the books are set. But like the whole 3rd book is about them going to like a beach house in like Point Moot? I've never known how to pronounce that word. But like, you know, the East Coast. And for me, that was like, oh, that's just like me going to Galveston as a kid in Texas. I don't know. It just feels like I point at it and be like, oh, I did that, you know?
You feel like some kind of intangible and yet very recognizable, like, existential is an overused word, but an existential through line between different elements of the narrative and the characters and your own sort of history and growing up.
Yeah. No, that feels good. It is very existential.
Feels almost like a connection on a deeper sort of wavelength. Like there's some special sort of tying of reality, like running between your experiences and like inclinations and the narrative of the book and the plot elements and the characters.
It's not like a wistfulness. It's not like, oh, I could have had that. It's more of like a I
recognition.
recognize that. Yeah.
That's lovely.
It is lovely. Thanks, Jeanne Birdsall. Hey, what about you, Victoria?
I'm glad Michael went first because you had so many eloquent things to say, as you often do.
I blacked out.
Well, it was all very great. I really enjoyed reading this book. It was very cozy and comforting, like you said, Jino. The main thing that I really enjoyed about this book was it really made me miss kid summers. Like summers where you don't really have a lot else going on, so you just find things for yourself to do. You pretend to be whatever, you put on plays.
You cause problems.
You run around outside or with your friends. And that was really fun and enjoyable just to experience with the characters. I also definitely approached it knowing that it was inspired by Little Women. And so it was really fun seeing the parts where I was like, okay, this is clearly inspired by Little Women or paying homage to Little Women. What I love about Little Women the most is how relatable the characters feel. But with the Penderwicks, because it's a much more modern context, it was like even more relatable. Like I can see myself as these characters even more than in Little Women. Although it was like in a different way. Like in Little Women, I can very distinctly say like, okay, I think I'm like a combination of Joe and Beth. With the Penderwicks...
Victoria?
What?
Why'd you mention Beth and you don't have scarlet fever, do you?
Victoria, don't look out that window.
I was a very sickly child.
Don't knit mittens. Don't talk about the birds, Victoria.
I do
No,
like
the
knitting.
immortal is shining through her face. Sorry, keep going.
No, I played piano and I like cats. Whereas with the Penderwicks, I don't think I related to them quite as much in terms of like distinctive parts of my personality reflected in the Penderwicks. Like obviously it's like, okay, Rosalind's the eldest and I like have the experience of being an older sibling, and then like Jane's a writer, but she's like very like vocal about talking about like all the characters, and she like imagines herself as the characters a lot. And I definitely did that. Like, I'm not saying I didn't do that, but it was like more of like a private thing, I guess. Like mainly like myself with my friends, like we pretend to be characters or whatever, role play and whatnot. But I just think Jane's personality is like at least like different than like who I am now. So it's harder for me to be like, yeah, I was like Jane. Maybe I was like Jane as a kid, but I just forgot.
The Penderwicks are much younger in this first book than the Little Women are in their first chapter. So there is sort of like a dissonance there too.
Yeah, so I'm really excited to read, because I really do want to read the subsequent books. So I'm really curious to see where the characters will go and how I will feel about them as they grow up.
Here's my question to you guys, and we'll get into a plot summary very quickly, but who do you think is the main character? Because all four sisters get point of view chapters, but who would you consider the main point of view sister?
We start the book, as I recall, primarily in Rosalind's perspective, but there was something about the section shortly after they arrive at the cottage, this vacation place, where we enter Sky's perspective. I don't know how to describe it, but something about the way that that section was written and something about the way that other sections with Sky were written, especially since Sky is present for, frankly, some of the most like important, like the most important scenes relevant to the progression of like the main overall story arc, make me feel like Sky is just a very central character in that way. Yeah, I sort of keep returning to Sky in that perspective.
Yeah, okay.
Right off the jump, my instinct was Sky. I don't know if it's just because I was like, oh, she's the second sister, and Jo is very much the main character of Little Women, so I was like kind of equating Jo and Sky's. I mean, Sky and Jane are kind of like a combo of Jo's personality traits, but I agree with Michael, like she's present during most of the major moments of introducing like Jeffrey as a character and his mother and other like major points. I actually, though, think it might be Batty because obviously she's so young in this, so like any thoughts and feelings she has are that of a 4-year-old, and she mainly like gets into shenanigans, and again, I'm very concerned about the safety of this child. But there are hints to her internal world that I'm sure would be really interesting to get into in future books, particularly moments where it notes that she feels left out by her older sisters when they gather together for their Moops. Yeah, I forgot what it stands for.
Meeting of older Penderwick sisters.
Yes. Meeting of older Penderwick sisters.
As opposed to mops.
Meeting of Penderwick sisters. Where she gets included. And you get these moments where Batty's like, I want to be part of Moops, but I'm not because I'm too young.
Because I'm a baby.
And then like the chapter where she accidentally runs away because she's let one of the rabbits out and she can't find it, and then she's like, I don't know how to manage my emotions and guilt about this, so I'm just gonna walk all the way home because hopefully by the time I make it home, my sisters and my dad and Cagney won't be upset with me anymore. And
she just starts going downhill.
And that's what, and that's
literally.
Like, and that's where you get the major Batty point of view and perspective on the world chapters. And at that point, she's just like, I'm just gonna keep walking. And then I hit this road, and Dad said that I should never ever cross a road without adult supervision. So I guess I'm stuck here. And then they find her, and all is well. But I don't know. That's just the vibe I get.
In my opinion, you're both correct, but for different reasons.
Ooh, okay.
Again, like I'm torn because I really want to spoil these other 4 books so I can talk about them with you guys. But I want you guys also to experience it for the first time like I did.
I've requested like specific things not to be spoiled because I want to read
like who
them.
Jeffrey ends up with.
We will talk about it in the recap. I vowed to read the rest of these books.
Okay. Or whether Batty ever crosses a road on them.
Well, I mean...
I'm looking forward to the big anime moment where Batty takes steps across the road.
Yeah, I'm just also thinking, like, story-wise, like, because in Little Women, we get Jo's experience of seeing her other sisters go off and, like, do things, and she feels left behind. Knowing that, because you've mentioned, like, they go to college in later books, and, like, they grow up. So I'm imagining, like, a similar thing could happen with Batty being currently the youngest Penderwick and just being like, oh, my sisters are growing up and I don't know. Also, like, there's the added context of like they just lost their mother, and Batty, being the youngest, has the least memories of her mom. And I don't know, there's just like so much potential for where Batty's character could go.
Yeah. I'll say books 1 through 3 to me feel like Sky books. 4 is definitely a Batty book. 5 is a mystery character you don't know.
Oh.
Exciting! Woo!
Oh.
Yeah. Okay. I'll try a plot summary.
Is it Dexter Dupree?
That's a hard left turn into like a completely different book, like Dexter Dupree at his magazine company.
About cars. For those who don't know, who are listening, Dexter Dupree is Jeffrey's soon-to-be stepfather, who the book makes sure to tell you all the different ways he antagonizes himself to each of the Penderwick sisters.
And
their dog.
the worst.
He's awful.
Okay.
Sorry.
Much like Little Women, the Penderwicks books are sort of like snippets of life. So like finding a through plot is sort of hard for this first book. But basically, 4 sisters, we've met them, and the dog, whose name is Hound, and Martin Penderwick, their professor, intellectual father who is like sort of hands off and just kind of like hanging out and chill, but like has a cool dad speech whenever he needs it.
I love him so much.
Yeah.
He's great. Platonic ideal of Professor Dad. They are vacationing in Arundel because their regular vacation spot has been sold by the landlord. Ooh. Arundel is this massive mansion, and they are vacationing in like this little shack to the side of the mansion.
It's not a shack, it's a guest house.
A little cozy cottage.
Yeah.
A cozy cottage, but it is because they do have a bunch of different rooms.
It's pretty
There's a
big.
bunch of different rooms. There's a kitchen. Like, it's like a really nice... I think it's like guest house is the best term. It's like if you have like a big estate, normally like either when guests come to visit, they could stay at the bigger house. But then it's like, oh, like if you want your guests to have their own space and you have a guest house where they can like do their own thing and they don't have to like feel like they're trespassing over like your home.
Yeah. When I was younger, I would imagine the Penderwick's guest house as like the upstairs is like this big sprawling area with multiple rooms and a long hallway, and the downstairs is this tiny circular kitchen and nothing else.
Yeah, that's kind of the vibe though.
So like the house is like an upside down cone, just like, with no foundational support. They are vacationing in Arundel, which is owned by the imperious Mrs. Tifton, who is mostly antagonistic but becomes sympathetic at the end. She is the mother of Jeffrey, who is the most boy you've ever boyed. And the Penderwicks basically, along with Jeffrey, just cause chaos and mischief throughout this really wealthy estate. The Penderwicks are not very well off financially, and their mother has just passed away recently from cancer, so they're all still smarting from that. But they soldier forward with this very strong bond between them. They have like a Penderwick family honor, and anytime someone insults the honor, they go into like rage mode, which is very satisfying. Big plot points is mostly revolves around Jeffrey. Jeffrey is a musician at heart, but Mrs. Tifton is set to marry Dupree, who apparently wants to get rid of Jeffrey by sending him to military academy under the guise of he'll be just like his grandpa.
Well, I think it's Mrs. Tifton has always wanted Jeffrey to go to military academy because her father, his grandfather, was a general, and he always wanted a son, but didn't get one. So she's trying to fulfill his wishes through Jeffrey. And she's like, you look so much like him. Like, it's clear that you must follow in his footsteps. This is the plot point that I want to talk about the most. I won't get into it right now, but I have so many... This touched on, like, some personal areas in my life.
Okay. Yes, you're correct. But the conflict in the book is that that's supposed to happen next year.
Yeah.
But Dexter's like, why not?
Dexter wants
right
to get rid of him
now?
as quickly as possible.
And then take
like,
Mrs. Tifton to like Paris or whatnot.
Yeah, he's like, I want to marry this woman, but she has a kid.
Which is always a really great sign for a healthy stepfather relationship.
Yeah.
Basically, as the Penderwicks cause more chaos and make Jeffrey have a happy summer, which is apparently a big no-no, and ruin things like Mrs. Tifton's garden competition, which he really cares about. And then they like break some urns and stuff while playing soccer.
I did get a lot of secondhand embarrassment from this book, I will say.
When I was reading it for this like first time, like post-college, I did have to put it down a couple of times because I was like, oh no!
You like see it happening slowly from a mile away and you're like, no.
Slow motion disaster.
Yeah, you're
Yeah,
watching
this-
the soccer ball curve over the hedge and you're like, oh no. Yeah.
And the prose really, like the narratorial voice really goes out of its way to be like, and did the children stop to think that they were told explicitly not to go in the garden? Nope.
No.
Like, here it comes,
Yeah.
and disaster. Other characters. Cagney is the gardener who Victoria thought was like 15, but
I'm
is
so
actually
sorry.
a man, an adult man.
He's like 18 or 19, but I accidentally skipped over, like I skimmed through the part where he was introduced. But I like, for some reason, didn't think about it until halfway through. And I was like, why is this 15-year-old the gardener?
He has his own apartment
Yeah.
and everything, and he drives a truck.
I'm sorry. No, okay, this is how I know because I wrote down, I was like, it's so weird that even his rabbits are noted in the title of the book, but he's not mentioned. It's like 4 sisters, 2 rabbits, a dog, and 1 interesting boy. And I'm like, what about Cagney? And I was like, oh.
Cagney. Rosalind is infatuated with Cagney. It's very much like she's 12 and Cagney's, 19. And so it's
Yeah.
very one-sided. And Cagney's sort of like this semi-oblivious, but also like understanding, like, hey, I'm a friend.
Yeah.
Like, there's a handful of the characters. There's like Harry the Tomato Man. He's there. He's hanging out,
Bringing tomatoes.
bringing tomatoes.
Wearing tomato-colored shirts.
Yeah. He's got his life figured out. What's the name of the cook?
Churchy.
Churchy the cook. She's the best. She makes gingerbread. Another Little Women reference.
Oh,
Because they're always
yeah.
eating gingerbread in Little Women.
I just, between this and the other, I've been like, I want gingerbread so bad.
And the fact that it's big slabs of gingerbread.
Yeah.
I'm like, don't make me cookies. I'm just going to take a bite of this big slab.
Have you ever had like gingerbread before?
Yeah.
But like not the cookie kind, but like the gingerbread
Oh,
kind.
no.
Oh.
I did once, and I tried some gingerbread, and I was like, I never knew. I've searched far and wide where to get a hold of actual gingerbread. I'm still on the hunt.
Do you have to make
You
it?
gotta make it.
I once sent away from a company in Washington called the Gingerbread Factory for a bunch of gingerbread cookies, and it was the best gingerbread.
Wow.
Ooh.
This has been like a quest for you.
This has been a bit of a... It's on hold. There's a lot going on right now.
The book culminates in the Penderwick shenanigans convince Mrs. Tifton that they're a bad influence, and so she decides to send Jeffrey away right now. Jeffrey, understandably, is upset about this, and so decides to run away, but is convinced to sleep in Batty's room before heading out early in the next morning instead of sleeping under Harry the Tomato Man's tomato stand, which seems like a bad idea.
Could have died from exposure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the summer. They're probably...
That's true.
It's probably going to be fine. There's a very emotional reunion and talk between Jeffrey and his mom, and she decides to obey his wishes and send him to boarding school so he can learn music and be a musician, just like Laurie from Little Women. And then the Penderwicks have a emotional goodbye to Arndale, and then they go home. And it's very much like a slice of life.
They're only there for like, what is it, 3 weeks?
3 weeks.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it feels like a lifetime.
Yeah. It just captures like when you're a kid
And you go to a
and
new
you
place.
go to a new place
Yeah.
and then you make new friends and then you have to leave them.
Yeah, and there's
You're
just a
just
little
like,
bit more
"Aw."
freedom than you're used to. So
Yeah.
you're like, the whole world's my oyster.
Yeah.
A slice of eternity.
Yeah. And it's just so, it's like a warm blanket or like a good cup of tea.
Yeah.
It's so cozy.
I like to note that of the moments of, because I've read books where it's like the point of it is like, and these kids get into chaos and make trouble. But like the chaos that gets made, it feels like those chapters, like the point is less about like, what kind of trouble they get in and more about how their unique character traits and like attitudes and perspectives kind of compel the trouble and the pranks to come about. So it's less like, I don't know, one of the things that was very fun for me reading was that it's less like I'm reading about all this crazy event that happened. How did this event happen? And more like, how do these characters going about their lives end up creating this event that's sort of not the point of the chapter, but becomes the button on the end?
Yeah. It's not just chaos for chaos sake. It's, well, what do they want? How do they get it? Oh no. Basic storytelling.
I mean, it's like the kids aren't bad kids. They're just kids being kids. And naturally you get into shenanigans because you're like, I want to do this. And sometimes you want to go say hi to the nice bull and then you almost die.
Yeah. And like the little anecdotes alongside of those chapters, like, oh yeah, and the story about the bull like killing a man was highly exaggerated. And here's how the story was exaggerated and whose fault it is. And Jeffrey's not innocent. He added 2 doctors to the story. Victoria, you wanted to talk about Jeffrey because we talked a lot about the sisters already.
Did I want to talk about Jeffrey?
You wanted to talk about being sent away to military school and never seeing your friends
again. No, I actually
again.
wanted to talk about Mrs. Tifton.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so Mrs. Tifton, she is a very antagonistic character. You don't like her for most of the book.
But you get her.
But you get her by the end.
Yeah.
I mean, like, you get her to the extent of, like, yeah, if I spent a lot of time and money on my garden, and then the minute I brought people over to look at it, these kids just wrecked it, I'd be pretty upset.
If my dad said he always wanted a child of a different gender than mine.
No, okay, so that's the thing. Like, that, to me, like, made me really understand Mrs. Tifton a lot. The generational trauma of, like, being told that you should be something that, like, you have no control over, and then you try to amend that through your kids, but then you end up hurting your kids in the process is just, like, a very real thing that happens to a lot of people. The reason why, like, it, like, hit a note for me personally is, like, in a lot of, I would say, like, not to generalize because it's different for everyone, but in a lot of Asian Chinese families, sons are more wanted than daughters, and it causes a lot of, whether you consciously know it or not, it can cause a lot of family issues over time because it starts from, like, one grandfather being like, I only wanted sons, and then it turns into, like, this person, like, had a son but, like, not enough sons, or, like, just, like, a whole host of issues can happen. When Mrs. Tifton revealed, like, I just did my best to, like, appease your grandfather, and it was really hard for me, like, she tells this story about how she hates swimming because when she was young, her dad, like, forced her to learn how to swim, and it caused, like, it was, like, a really traumatic event, and, like, that's just very real. And so it was really great writing that the author was able to take this character that you're like, I really don't like you and you're really mean to these kids, and then you're like, okay, you're still mean to the kids and it doesn't justify it, but I get where it's coming from, and I'm glad that you're making efforts to at least hear out your son and hopefully amend the harm that's been done.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
A very poignant message in this very rambunctious book.
Yeah.
Jeffrey is already he's a very interesting boy, but he becomes a very, like, his character development is very intriguing, especially in not the next book, but the 3rd book is a very Jeffrey-centric book because it's basically Skye, Jane, and Batty and Jeffrey going off to another, like, vacation spot, this time on the coast.
Mm-hmm.
And Jeffrey's past comes back to stuff about his past.
I am really intrigued by Jeffrey. I definitely related to his struggle to just, like, be open and honest with his mom.
Yeah.
Because, like, it's just, like, tough to tell your parents, like, this is what I actually want.
And by the time he gets the courage, it's, like, almost too late because now she's made up her mind.
And, like, the fear of, like, you don't want to say it because you don't want to experience the consequences of having that conversation, but then you also, like, feel like you have to. So then it's, like, this, like, push and pull of, like, oh, you really need to do it, but, like, it's not, like, the time. Yeah. So I am very curious to see where Jeffrey... I'm assuming it's something to do with his dad.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, yeah, inevitably.
Yeah, because one of his wishes in this book is that when he's like, I'm going to run away to the city and maybe I'll find my dad who, like, abandoned me as a baby, and maybe I'll find him and, like, be able to reconnect with him. So I assume something to that nature happens.
Yeah, maybe.
Whether that goes well for him or not, we shall find out.
Yeah. One thing I noticed, especially on this read-through, and again, while reading Little Women, is that there are certain hints in this book, like almost like one-off lines, that almost verbatim tell you what's going to happen in the next 4 books.
Huh.
Some of them, again,
Wow.
like Little Women, not references, but the character progressions, like Sky is clearly like a Joe-ish person. And then like you kind of like smoosh Jane. There's not really a Beth, so you can split Joe up into 2
Yeah.
kids. And then, Rosalind and Cagney, according to an interview with the author, was an unintentional Meg and Mr. Brooks.
Huh.
Except the author was like, but I was never going to let Rosalind and Cagney. That was never going to happen. And then with Batty, I don't want to spoil it.
Sorry, I didn't want to
Victoria
limit
and I
you.
will leave the room, and you can tell the listener.
just talk to an empty room about these kids'
And I will
books.
turn off my ears when I edit.
I'll just do some claps and like skip this part up to here and I'll clap again. No, I won't do that. Okay, I'll say this. A major conflict within the remaining books is Sky and Jeffrey's friendship / relationship.
Mm-hmm.
Like, Jeffrey is clearly a Laurie stand-in.
Yeah.
And the similar like infatuation that Laurie feels for Joe is again like mirrored with Jeffrey and Sky.
Mm-hmm.
And then like Joe's rejection of Jeffrey, Sky's rejection of Jeffrey. But me not knowing that, reading that, I was like, oh, will they? No. You know? And what happens after the result of that. Again, with Little Women, it's pretty, you can guess that Sky and Jeffrey will not end up together if they're following that trope. But I think it's interesting how it happens.
Yeah, I guess that's the cool thing is even though I know that it's greatly inspired by Little Women, there's still like no telling who's going to end up with who for whatever reason, you know?
Yeah. It's interesting also because the book where that culminates is from Batty's perspective.
Ooh.
So you don't get a lot of like
The internal.
it's always like they're yelling, they're arguing upstairs, or like someone comes home upset, or like, you know, a rumor her like, so it's
I'm
like,
so excited actually.
Wow.
Yeah,
that's,
you know.
That's fun.
it's fun. Because then it really keeps you engaged. I think Jeanne Birdsall does a really great job of keeping you engaged, even when she swaps to a different character that maybe you weren't that interested in, because the characters you were interested in, at least the characters I was interested in, are still there and they're still doing stuff. And you're like, hey, go check on him. Tell me what's going on.
If it was a video game, you'd be like always checking in on them, being like, so, how's it going?
Any new dialogue trees?
Yeah.
Click, 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 click.
That's great. I really like that concept. As much as like a part of me is always like, but I want to know all the internal thoughts and feelings of everyone. I'm also like, no, that's like a really cool experience and like a lens to frame family conflict and dynamics.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's also awesome to have Batty as a POV character because like she's literally like a little baby child.
Yeah.
And then you just watch her become a fully realized human being by the end.
That's cool.
It's just nice.
Yeah.
It's cool.
Along the line of dichotomies, you know, like within these different characters, I just said Batty's the youngest and is often in peril, but she does have a dichotomy to her where she is like very cute and funny and adorable. And, you know, she likes feeding Cagney's bunnies and everything, and she has all these stuffed animals, but she's mercenary in all the ways that little kids are mercenary, where she asks Jeffrey, like, will you take me to feed the bunnies and also, like, let me ride piggyback? And then Jeffrey's like, and Sky's like, you have to be strong. And he's like, I'll take you to the bunnies, but it's not piggyback, it's something else. She's like, will you also do this other wild thing for me? And Jeffrey's like, I'll take you to feed the bunnies, but not this other thing. And Batty's like, great, I thought you'd say no to both. And then like later, Mr. Dupree makes some comment about like how like that small one, something's wrong with her. Something's off about her.
Yeah.
And like Sky reports this to her dad when they have all these grievances. And Mr. Penderwick looks out in the backyard at Batty, who's playing vampires with Hound, their dog, and is like jumping over, I think, like a small pool with Hound or whatever, and yelling, blood, blood! And Mr. Penderwick's like, I think that's normal enough.
Yeah. Or when Batty has the confrontation when Mrs. Tifton and Dupree are trying to like find Jeffrey, and Batty's like, I'm gonna lock the door. You cannot come in here now. Yeah, it's good stuff. Are
you okay?
Sorry, I'm not. I feel bad that I've limited your conversation topics.
But I'll just say this, dear listener, if you like your conversation here and you want to read the Penderwicks books, the second book is about Mr. Penderwick. It's about basically Mr. Penderwick has been requested to get back into a relationship, to begin dating, to move on from the death of his wife. But he doesn't want to do this, and his children don't want him to do this. And so the whole book's about them all fighting to not do this, while also out of obligation doing it. That's the main conflict of the book.
That's fun.
Yeah.
And it introduces an aunt character.
Ooh.
You know, like a...
Aunt March.
Yeah. Who's very cool, and she helps. And then the third book is basically you yoink Rosalind out because she's getting too old. And now Sky is the oldest Penderwick, the OPS, oldest Penderwick sister.
Oldest available Penderwick. Ope.
Yeah. Ope. I love their acronyms.
That alone tells you so much about what their family dynamic is like. I loved it so much. Like, I was like, I know so much about these sisters and how they interact with each other.
It's the kind of family dynamic that, like, me as a kid always wanted.
Same.
Like, because we both have one sibling.
Yeah.
And that's great. And my brother's fantastic. But having, like, a whole group of kids that you have this, like, really strong camaraderie with, but also, like, they're not, like, your friends. They're not going to go away. Like, you're all, like, stuck together. Like, that sort of environment I was always craving as a kid. And, like, you know, I'm not going to blame my parents for that.
Why didn't you have more of us?
Wow.
I mean, like, going back to how I said, like, this book made me miss kid summers, like, it made me miss, like, a simpler time where, like, your friends lived nearby and you could just run over and, like, hang out with them. But also, like, I didn't always have that as a kid either. So, like, it was still, like, something that I wanted as a kid, which was, like, a next door neighbor that you're, like, best friends with, that you can just, like, hang out with whenever you want. Usually my friends were, like, further away, and I didn't get that really until I was old enough to drive to, like, take myself within proximity.
Or
but
like that sliver of time in college when you're like, everyone I know is here.
Yeah.
And then the pandemic hits. But third book is about, like, so now Sky is the oldest. And Jane's like, but you're not that much older. I'm not going to listen to you. And Jeffrey's like, my family! Kind of, like, on the side. And then the fourth one is Batty stuff. She's doing stuff.
Blood.
Blood. We do a little bit of a time jump. So now she's, like, in middle school, I think, or something. And she's trying to start like, a dog walking business. And obviously, we're jumping ahead, like, throughout the book series, jumping ahead, like, 15 plus years. So Hound doesn't make it.
Aww.
So, like, you know, grappling with that.
Blood.
Hound is her best friend.
Yeah, but he's also
Hound
a
is,
dog.
like, psychically linked to this girl.
Yeah.
Aw.
You told us no one died, Jino. You told us.
I lied.
Hound is Beth in this one. No.
Oh,
The death flags. There was one death flag, and it read dog.
It read time skip and dog.
I skipped dog. Yeah. And then the fifth book is about returning to Arendelle for a wedding.
I do know.
Whose wedding?
I actually do know that because I read like brief, like, what are these books about?
Interesting.
Yeah.
Which piqued my interest even more.
It's the long deferred wedding of Mrs. Tifton and Dupree.
The first book is like Dupree being like, we got to get married as soon as possible. And then the last book is like, and they didn't get married for 15 years.
Wow. But it's like, but like,
I
again.
mean, okay, my hypothesis is because they're getting married at Arendelle.
Mm-hmm.
Probably Jeffrey is one of the people getting married, because why else would they get married there? I don't know.
Who knows? Maybe it's Cagney and Kathleen.
No, they
the
broke up
girl
at
that
the
he
end.
says, I don't like her anymore.
Yeah.
Maybe they loop back.
That'd be wild.
No, I don't know who he ends up with, but I'm excited to find out.
I'll just say there are Little Women parallels, but not just.
So what you're saying
Laurie.
is Sky marries an old German professor.
Damn. Spoiled again.
Can you imagine reading the Penderwicks?
I can't.
With having like no Little Women context.
But I want to talk about that, but I can't.
Okay, I'm sorry.
But it's like, but it's really interesting what actually does happen, and like the Little Women parallels.
Okay, well,
Why don't we do a follow-up Penderwicks episode
I would like that.
where we talk about the full series?
If we loop back, because if we do the season recap, if we've read the rest of the Penderwicks,
yeah.
assuming they're not like too much longer, it could be possible.
I mean,
And we
there's
could-
4 books, but they're all, pretty easy to read.
Yeah. I'm obviously very down to read all of these books, but I'm like, it feels like there's a lot more to talk about than a recap episode would do justice. So perhaps we should table it for a follow-up full episode.
I would be okay with that.
Yeah.
But don't worry, listener, it will not be spread out too far from this episode.
It'll probably be next season,
Yeah.
though.
It'll be
Yeah,
in
yeah.
15 years. If half this episode is me just like screaming that I can't talk about the Penderwicks, I'll pitch this to you guys then. Do you guys have any chaos summer stories? Like, oh, we went a place and it was crazy and I broke things. Or I made new friends and it was wild.
Oh, you're talking to a couple of nerds.
I am a nerd talking to a couple of nerds.
I think, okay, I actually thought about this because I was like, I do miss kid summers, but I definitely didn't have summers like this where it's just like, I was never that
Yeah.
kid where I just like caused trouble
Mhm.
for like the heck of it. The closest I can get to a similar experience is going to summer camp when I was in high school. My first year of camp, so it was like a church summer camp. So I was the only one from my youth group who went to this camp. And so I was like, I don't know anyone. I am very shy and bad at making friends. But I did end up making 2 friends. That's why I was like, I relate to like the scenario of like, you have like 4 days with these people and you're just going to like try and become as good friends with them as possible.
Yeah,
And then afterwards, you're always like, we'll stay in touch. And then like, may or may not.
usually you don't.
Usually don't. I did really attempt to like, I think the first year I like failed to stay in contact with those friends. And then the next year I met up with those friends again and I was like, I'm really going to try. And then so like I did maintain like email correspondence with one of them for a little bit. But anyways, so like the closest I can get to is like we did this whole thing. It's so hard to tell this story out of context because it makes no sense. It's not even a very particularly interesting story.
That's okay. Many camp stories are like this.
Yeah. But one day we just decided we're like, it'd be really funny. There's like a bridge between the dorm area and like the chapel. We're like, it'd be really funny if we just like sat on this bridge and we just asked everyone who passed by, have you seen Connie? Connie was one of the counselors. And so every person that walked by were like, have you seen Connie? And people were like, no, I haven't. I'll let you know if I see her. And it was just that for like a whole day.
Oh my God.
Connie's getting barraged by people going, hey, someone's
Everyone's
looking
like,
for you.
"Someone's looking for you." And then, like, these are the shenanigans that we'd get up to, like, because we're, like, at camp.
The
And we
kind
had-
of thing where like you're kind of bored, you don't have a lot to do,
Yeah.
but you have a bunch of friends and like sort of a structure you can poke fun at.
Yeah.
So let's torment this one person.
And it was, like, our inside joke, and we thought it was so funny. There's, like, stuff like that. Yeah. I'm trying to think if there's, like,
It's hard.
like, I mean, no.
Yeah, go for it.
I mean, I was going to say, like, I forgot to tell this story during Little Women, but, like, they put on plays at home where, like, they're all the characters, and my brother and I did that all the time.
Hmm.
Where, like, we would just be all the characters, or we'd have stuffed animals be characters.
Oh yeah,
So that was a good time.
yeah. What about you, Michael?
I don't know. I think I had like isolated good summer experiences where, it's like, oh, you take a trip to the beach with, the family and the neighbors or something. Or, family vacation to visit other family on the other coast or whatever. You go to visit them and make the rounds that way. I think in some of those vacations, maybe 2 of them, there was like visiting a relative where they had a substantial area of woods in the backyard with a pond as well.
I love a good area of woods.
Yeah, yeah, and like young cousins who you could like meet and like establish a decent rapport with in a short enough amount of time.
Yeah.
And when, it's like 4th of July or something, so a bunch of people get together and have a barbecue and you're just with the kids and running around in the woods and playing games. Who knows what the games are? So instances like that. Back at home, mostly blasé, mostly boring, unless you sort of find something to do, or you have Pokemon on Game Boy.
Yeah.
Or you have like a friend who for a clutch of years happens to live within your neighborhood. And so you're like, can so-and-so play today? No? Oh, okay.
I was always upset when I was a kid because I did have some neighborhood kids who I was like kind of friends with, but I never got a chance to properly become friends with them because anytime they were outside in the neighborhood playing, I was inside practicing piano. And my mom wouldn't let me leave and play. She's like, you can't
Relatable.
leave until you play piano. And I was like, by the time I play piano, they'll be gone.
For what it's worth, it can be a bit of a crapshoot.
Yeah.
I had neighbors that I played with outside, and it was great. But especially when you're kids, you get in all sorts of arguments.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
You'll make each other very angry and hurt feelings all around. But, and then I think there was in my K through 8 school, there was like 2 weeks out of the summer where the PE teachers, one of whom was my aunt, would host this 8 a.m. to 12 p.m. or 9 a.m. to 12 or 1 mini summer camp thing where the kids, the parents just drop off the kids and they just do activities.
Yeah.
The parents can have a morning for groceries or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that was good. It was called Fit Camp.
Fit camp.
There was, because I was in Boy Scouts for a little bit, and there was during one summer a week I spent in Catalina. It was like a bunch of different Boy Scout troops coming together. That was racked with homesickness on my part.
Oh.
But during the days, it was a little more okay, and you could get into rambunctious Boy Scout trouble, I guess. I don't know. I canoed to a beach with a bunch of other boys, not on our own time, but as a part of an activity. So just a mess like that. But that's the thing. It's like all those experiences are sort of nestled within the imperfections of life and the complications of being a kid. And something like the Penderwicks is just this
It condenses it.
It condenses it, and it's this ideal, this perfect ideal of, the perfect guest house with the perfect room for you.
Yeah.
And meeting a strange and interesting person who happens to be this wonderful friend.
And he's incredibly rich.
And getting into all kinds of trouble, and there's danger and threat, but, it's abated just as fast. And
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you have any fun stories, Jino?
The closest thing I can think of, because again, one of the reasons why this book speaks to me is because I can relate to the feeling of having these summer experiences, but I never had a direct correlation. So it's kind of like living vicariously through the characters. The closest I can get is that I had a friend whose house was connected. I might have told this story on the podcast already, so cut it out if I have. But I had a friend whose backyard was connected to this creek that ran through my neighborhood, this really steep, jungly,
I don't think I've heard this story
Texas
before.
creek.
I don't think I've heard this either.
Okay, yeah, great. And so we'd go on expeditions. We put on rain boots and we get walking sticks and nets and whatever, and we'd go down into the creek and we just explore the creek.
Wow.
And when you're
See, the problem was I wasn't this outdoorsy of a kid.
I was the least outdoorsy of the group, so I was often falling behind or getting injured, or I was I'd be too scared to go on or something. But I wanted to I want to be cool and hang out with the boys or whatever. And so on the creek, it's really steep, it's muddy, it's full of plants, giant bamboo forests or whatever. It felt like a different world down there. It would take us an hour to go 3 houses. So we'd go on the expeditions, we'd find all sorts of trash and stuff down there. And then, it gets dark and we have to exit the creek, but we don't know where we are. The creek runs through backyards, so we can see houses up above us on this ravine. And we're let's just pick a house and we'll just run through the backyard. And so more than once, there would just be half a dozen or so boys just emerging from your backyard, just sprinting through we don't know you. And they're covered in mud and dressed in rain boots and cargo shorts and whatever, holding big sticks and trash. And they're just running through your backyard into the street.
That's awesome.
And we're just we hope they're not home. We hope they're not home.
The thrill of being a kid and doing something that might get you in trouble, but not super big trouble. Just you're doing something that could bother the adults.
Yeah. Or you guys ever gone TPing or anything like that?
No, I was not brave
You
enough.
ever vandalize another person's property as a child?
Oh, TPing, throwing toilet paper.
Yeah.
Nah.
We got TP'd a lot. Our
Really?
house, yeah.
We got TP'd a couple times, but it was always really sad, a really sad attempt, because we had really tall oak trees or pine trees or whatever.
Yeah.
And so we'd come outside and there'd be often either our house or the school, oftentimes a single roll of toilet paper. Someone threw one strand of it and then I guess gave up and left the entire roll just sitting there.
Free toilet paper.
Maybe they got maybe someone approached and they got scared. So we come outside to this one the world's lamest TP attempt. But one time I went forking for a birthday party.
Forking?
So what it means is you get a bunch of plastic forks and you stick them in someone's lawn. And so their lawn is covered with plastic forks. And they're plastic forks, so they break off in the dirt or whatever. And it's such a pain. It's a huge mess.
Yeah.
And aerating the soil a little
You're
bit.
aerating the soil with plastic. It was for a birthday party of these kids I didn't know very well. But the dad was like, we're going to go fork my friend's lawn.
The dad?
Yeah. And so we all
Whoa.
piled into his pickup truck and we like down the street.
Oh my God.
And like in the middle of the night, we all pile out and we start forking this guy's lawn. And I think we also like, they also like did something to the front door. I wasn't part of that team. I was part of the fork team. And then at some point he was like, all right, let's get out of here. And we all pile into the truck and zoom away. And I don't know what the outcome is because I didn't know those kids very well. But I'm like, I hope you're real good friends with the owner of this house because like,
You demolished.
that's so much work to clean up just a bunch of broken forks in your lawn.
Yeah.
That's the closest I've come to like shenanigans.
They're
You
pretty
ever-
good shenanigans, though.
You ever chalk someone's driveway?
Is that just like drawing chalk all over the driveway?
It's basically like, no, I'm not going to let you TP our neighbors. You can chalk their driveway. That
Easy to get rid of. Yeah.
harmless
Yeah.
and kind of fun to be on the receiving end because you're like, oh, look, chalk.
It was different for me because I didn't go to like the public school. I went to like the private school. So all the neighborhood kids knew each other and then I didn't really know them. So like my window of like getting in with the neighborhood kids was pretty narrow. And so sometimes I'd just sit out there and watch them run by and be like, I don't know you, but I wish I was out there.
Any last Penderwick thoughts? Until we return with more Penderwick's context.
Just to do a call out of when Jane imagines to herself that Dexter Dupree is like Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde and just imagines for herself that maybe there's a bad Mr. Hyde side of him, but also a good Dr. Jekyll side of him. And maybe the good side of him is the one who says he wants to publish my book.
I felt so bad for her.
And she
That
goes
was so
up.
real when Mrs. Tifton was like, oh, he's a publisher. You should tell him about your book. I was like,
Oh,
that's
no.
the amount of times that's like happened
Yeah,
as
rip.
like someone in the entertainment industry.
Yeah, especially like with our niche. Like,
Yeah.
because we're podcasters. And so
Yeah.
people are like, oh, I have a friend in the movies. You
Yeah.
want to talk to? I'm like, it's not.
It's not.
Yeah.
There's not going to be a lot of. Yeah,
But
it's very real.
He's just like, you misspelled helium. You're like, what?
Felt
What
so
about my
bad for
writing?
her.
It's lousy. Get lost. And you're like,
No.
And you're like, I'm gonna suplex this man.
also
Yeah.
the when Rosalind goes out for her like midnight excursion because she's all a tussle with thoughts of romance and boys, and she sees Cagney having a romantic evening with some girl across the pond, and she like slips and falls in and like has to be brought back by Cagney embarrassingly, and her dad is like. Her dad is basically like, you weren't doing anything like I should be concerned about. And she's like, no, Dad. And he's trying to figure out how to like ask. And he's
Yeah.
like, if your mother were still alive, did you do anything that you would be ashamed to tell her? And she's like, no. And he's like, then it's fine. And she's like, I'd be embarrassed, but I wouldn't be ashamed. And he just says, don't confuse me. It's just such a dad plead. Like, don't.
He's like, please just let me have this reassurance.
No, Martin Penderwick is such like a exhausted, like, I'm just on vacation with my kids. I'm gonna sit in my room and read about my plants, and I hope they don't die. And so like the second book about like, you need help. Like, yeah, it's nice.
But that's all I got.
But also whenever because like Rosalind comes home soaked, and then Sky and Jane both come home like, so for like different reasons they all come home like, physically wet.
Oh, yeah.
yeah,
And he's
He's
like, why
all
do my
daughters are just...
they show up drenched.
Yeah. He's like, are you dry? Yes. Why? Just, it's been a pattern.
I wanted to mention the moment where Sky gets to just like yell at Mrs. Tifton was really satisfying.
Mm.
Because Mrs. Tifton says some terrible, terrible things about their family and about their mom, who she like doesn't even know anything about. And like Sky is just like eavesdropping, and you just want her to give Mrs. Tifton a taste of her own medicine. And my impression reading it was like, I don't think she's going to be able to do it because she's a kid and Mrs. Tifton's this adult. And I was like, it really sucks that she can't like tell Mrs. Tifton how she's wrong. And then it does happen, and I was like, yes, vindication.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's very satisfying.
I was like, I appreciate that she was able to like tell Mrs. Tifton to her face, like, how dare you say those things about my mom? She's dead. And Mrs. Tifton is like, oh, I messed up.
We do get a little more Mrs. Tifton.
Yeah,
in
I
the
was about
fifth
to
book.
ask, I was like, do we get more expansion of her character in future books?
We get like her like kind of So Jeffrey's not a constant character. He kind of dips in and out depending on the book.
Yeah.
So we get a little bit of her like in conjunction with him, but then we do get like she actually shows up in the last book because they're going to her house.
They're at her house, yeah.
For like, a wedding between, two people. Who could they be? Who knows?
I'm excited.
Well, thank you both very much for indulging me. And I hope this episode was fun to listen to and not just me yelling that I can't say anything. But we'll be back. We'll talk about it more. Don't apologize because it's worth reading and not being spoiled.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for listening. If you want to email us with questions or comments, or you want us to read a thing that you like, nostalgicalpodcast@gmail.com is where you can find us. We also have Instagram at Nostalgical Podcast and a Ko-fi if you want to send us money so we can use it to buy goods and services in this terrible economy. We also have Mouse Knight Studios. Listen to Ghost Inspectors wherever you get your podcasts, and find us on Blue Sky and other social media platforms, maybe.
Yes.
Woo.
Yes. And until next time.
Blood!
Until next time, build a time machine so you can return to a time when you had fewer worries as a child and you could just run around outdoors enjoying the sunshine.
Oh, I wish.
That's a good call to action.
Yeah.
You're outsourcing the work to someone else.
Yeah.
Yes,
so that
build a
we
time
can
machine
use
so
it.
that I can go back and... No, I was like, I should have been outdoors more as a kid.
Yeah, build a time machine so Victoria can go back in time and meet those neighborhood kids while her earlier self is playing piano.
If I could clone myself so that one clone could play piano and the other clone could be outside.
We
that
can
would
go
be great.
outside now.
That's
I mean, like,
true.
our bodies don't work the same way. Like, we're a lot, aches and pains, and we can't run as well. But, like, we can go outside now.
That's true. I do enjoy going to the park now.
Yeah.
Until next time, go outside and touch grass.
Yeah.
Enjoy the
Yeah.
sunshine. Wear sunscreen, though. Don't get skin cancer.
Yeah, wear sunscreen and put on a hat, okay? Take care of yourself. Bring some water. Make sure you drink some water. Uh-oh, we're the adults.
Yeah.